The US covets Greenland, plotting. Since World War II, Canada declares the era of deep economic and security cooperation with the US has ended after President Trump announces auto tariffs at the International Arctic Forum in Murmansk, Russia, on March 27th. Russian President Vladimir Putin stated that US President Donald Trump was serious about his plan to acquire Greenland, the world's largest island. At first glance, this may surprise some people. However, it would be a big mistake to think that this is just a far-fetched plan of the new US administration. President Vladimir Putin said, "The US intention to buy Greenland dates back to the 19th century, so it is not surprising that President Donald Trump has repeatedly expressed his desire to make Greenland a part of US territory." According to Putin, the US established a military base in Greenland after World War II and proposed purchasing the island from Denmark, but the offer was not accepted. However, the US has continued to pursue economic, military, and geopolitical interests in the Arctic. Putin's comments came after President Trump once again mentioned his ambition to acquire Greenland. The US needs Greenland. The world needs the US to have Greenland. Even Denmark needs it, Trump stated. The Russian president affirmed that this issue is unrelated to Moscow, but expressed concern that NATO countries in general are increasingly considering the island as a launchpad for potential conflicts. During Trump's presidency, tensions between the US and Russia somewhat eased, and Moscow also sought to enhance cooperation with Washington in the Arctic. Greenland is a vast island covering 2.16 million square kilometers, with a strategically important location and abundant natural resources. Since taking office, US President Donald Trump has repeatedly expressed his desire to make Greenland part of US territory, and he has not ruled out using military or economic power to persuade Denmark. However, the Danish government and the people of Greenland have completely rejected this idea, declaring that Greenland is not for sale. A US delegation, including Vice President J.D. Vance and Second Lady Usha, is currently visiting Greenland. The delegation was scheduled to attend Avanata Kimuserua, one of the world's largest dog sledding events. However, this program was cancelled due to protests by the people of Greenland. According to Independent, the people of Greenland and the Danish government were displeased with this visit. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen accused the US of unacceptable pressure on Greenland through the trip. "I must say that this is an unacceptable form of pressure on Greenland and Denmark, and it is pressure that we will oppose," Frederiksen told Danish broadcasters DR and TV2 earlier this week. The Prime Minister of Canada declared that the era of deep economic and security cooperation with the US has ended after President Trump announced new auto tariffs. Also on March 27th, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney stated, "The relationship we had with the US, based on deep economic integration and close security and military cooperation, has ended." Prime Minister Carney called the White House's 25% auto tariff absurd, warning that it could severely damage Canada's auto industry, which provides approximately 500,000 jobs. He warned that President Trump had permanently changed Canada-US relations and that there is no going back, regardless of how future trade agreements unfold. President Trump announced plans to impose a 25% import tariff on all cars not manufactured in the US, which is 10 times the current rate. The new tariff will take effect on April 2nd. This is also the day President Trump plans to announce reciprocal import tariffs against US trading partners. Prime Minister Carney stated that the White House had reached out to schedule a call and that he would speak with President Trump in the next 1 or 2 days. He added that there would be no trade negotiations until President Trump shows respect, particularly by ending statements about turning Canada into the 51st state of the US. The withdrawal of all Russian forces from Ukraine will be one of the key conditions for the European Union, EU, to lift or modify its sanctions. One of the prerequisites for modifying or lifting the sanctions is that Russia must cease its actions in Ukraine and withdraw all troops from Ukrainian territory. An EU spokesperson stated on March 26th, this statement comes as the US has reached separate agreements with Ukraine and Russia to temporarily halt attacks at sea and on energy targets. In exchange, Washington has agreed to push for the removal of some sanctions on Moscow. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the US would consider the conditions set by Russia, but emphasized that a peace agreement would take time. This is not simple. It will take time. We will assess the situation. Some of these conditions involve sanctions that are not ours, but those imposed by the EU, Rubio stressed. Trong ki jo, tong tong pap. Emmanuel Macron keugoi nga chapnan angung ban o Ukraine vojiu kien. On kung chobiet kon kwa som. Jeksem set dobo len trungfhat nga chuyen tuan. Bojai Juvan Ban Tren Sang Tieng An. NATO Secretary-General issues stern. Warning to Russia, declares no normalization of relations. Post-Ukraine conflict. According to Politico, NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte stated on March 26th that the alliance would respond with full force to any attack. If anyone miscalculates and thinks they can attack Poland or any other NATO member without consequences, they will face the full strength of this determined alliance, Rutte said at a press conference alongside Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk during his visit to Warsaw. Also on March 26th, Rutte declared that NATO would not normalize relations with Russia after the Ukraine conflict ends. The NATO Secretary-General asserted that a complete normalization of diplomatic relations will not happen due to a lack of trust. Russia has consistently denied any intention of attacking NATO. In December 2023, Russian President Vladimir Putin stated that Moscow does not want war with NATO countries, but instead seeks to improve relations with them. However, Putin and several high-ranking Russian officials have warned that Western arms supplies to Ukraine could trigger a Russia-NATO conflict. While NATO views this as a hostile signal, there is no concrete evidence of any Russian plans to attack a member of the alliance.